Welcome to another episode of Seeing Them Live, a podcast featuring memorable concert stories from live music fans. Everyone has a concert story, and hopefully, one day, we'll hear yours. And now, we'll hear Rick's.
He's walking down this skinny hallway, and we're getting closer and closer and closer, and his security guy's behind him, this big guy. We're getting closer, and just kind of like getting my hand up, and this monster of a man comes out this door like right between us and just everybody back. He just pushes us back, and me and my friend go into this side room, go into this door, and he goes by, and it's really quiet in this room, and we look over, Dave Stewart, Annie Lennox, Bono, and Edge, and sitting there having this like intense conversation. Me and my buddy just go blasting into this room, and everybody just looks up, and we're like, oh, hi.
Rick started working in the music industry at the age of 18, where he managed a Music Plus record store located on Sunset and Vine in Los Angeles. He's also worked for a few independent record labels and distribution companies. Rick has blogged about the local San Diego music scene for 3 years and is the host and creator of the Rock Talk Studio podcast. This is where Rick reviews the latest rock music books, documentaries, and movies, letting his listeners know if a certain book, movie, or documentary is worth their time. Rick has also been to numerous concerts over the years, starting when he was just 14 years old, and he also plays guitar for fun. Rick, welcome to Seeing Them Live.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me. And I've listened to your show for a while, and I really enjoy it. So it's nice to get the invitation, and I'm looking forward to talking about concerts.
Yeah, Rick, you've been to a lot of concerts, too many to list on our guest form, but we usually like to start out with like your first concert, and we'll get to your podcast here in a minute, but I thought we'd start with some of your live music experiences.
Yeah.
You'd said you'd seen Kiss in 1978 when you were 14. Your dad took you to that show, right?
It was my friend's dad. His dad took us to the Kiss show, Springfield Civic Center, Springfield, Massachusetts. What a start for live shows at that young age. I mean, I can still remember just the singeing my eyebrows with the explosions of Kiss. I was so into them when I was younger. It's like the first band I could really remember being really, really into, but that concert experience just lit the fuse for wanting to see more. That live experience was just so bombastic. It was so intense. It was like nothing I've ever seen. It was so loud, and I was so young. It just took me away.
My younger brother, that was the first concert he had gone to. He saw them with some friends in 1976. I remember him telling me when Gene Simmons would blow fire breathing, whatever, you could feel the heat go off the stage, and he's
right.
And he's like 8 years old. So totally, of course, blew his mind. Were you guys part of the Kiss Army or anything like that?
No, I never did get into the Kiss Army. That was like kind of the jump off point for me. And then it just really exploded for me as far as live shows. I think the next couple of shows I saw was ZZ Top, Yes, the original band in the round, and then the Allman Brothers, and then the J. Geils Band. Being from back east, the J. Geils Band was a thing. That was the next obsession for me live. And then Dylan too. The Dylan thing kind of slid in there also. But the J. Geils Band as a live band, I've seen thousands of shows, and they're still the greatest live band I've ever seen.
I've never actually seen them live, but I heard they put on a fantastic show.
Absolutely. It's funny, they have kind of a weird rap because they hit their commercial peak towards the end of their career. And everybody says, oh, the band that did Centerfold, that band? I'm like, yeah, that was one of their songs. But there's so much came before we finally had that moment there with the Freeze Fame album. I mean, 1969, I think, was their first album. Those guys they just got down. I mean, every night, 3-4 hour shows. And Peter Wolf as a front man was maybe Mick Jagger could be up there with him, but man, he's towards the top as a front man.
Then when you're 18 years old, is it correct, Rick? You started managing this record store. Is that in Hollywood?
It was in Hollywood on Sunset and Vine. I lived in Connecticut and I moved to California with a friend. We kind of went for it when we were young and just packed it all up and drove until we saw the Hollywood sign.
Wow.
Yeah, my friend my friend was in the service, and he came out of the service, and I was working for my stepfather in a plastic factory. He was starting to sell plastic. I don't know what I was doing. I was out of high school, and he called me up on Monday, and he said, "Hey, I'm moving to California on Saturday. Are you with me?" And I was like, "Man, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. Let's go have a beer and catch up." So we went and had a beer. It's Tuesday night, and he's like, "I'm going to California. Are you coming?" Come on, my mom's gonna kill me, first of all. I can't just leave in 4 days to my whole life. And then, Wednesday goes by and calls me up, "Coming?" And come on. Thursday comes up, calls me, "You coming?" And called me right up to that Friday. And I literally can't tell you why I made that decision, but I did. It was just one of those things. I was from a very, very small town in Connecticut, and that just my whole world opened up, and we traveled across the country and ended up in Hollywood. And I remember when I left, the guys at the place where I was working said, "You're never gonna get a job in a record store out there," because I was working at a record store kinda at
Mm,
night too. It's like
mm.
people, they line up down the street in Hollywood to get a job at a record store, and I was like, "Oh, no, what am I doing?" And I remember I went in and put my application in, and I got the job. Pretty quickly after that, I was managing the store because I was just so into it. It was just such a it was my world because it was music, but it was, it was Hollywood and the music scene was just right there. It was great.
Yeah, because I had mentioned to you then previously, did you see any in-store concerts or what do they call them? In-stores?
And store appearances, yeah, at the time. Yeah, we did a bunch of them at the Hollywood store. The Hollywood store obviously was a very popular store. It was
Yeah.
the number one store in a chain of 92. So we always had stuff. I remember we had in-store appearances there. Itzhak Perlman, the violin player, did an in-store appearance there. That was incredible. What's the guy from Dirty Dancing, the actor guy?
Oh, Patrick Swayze?
Patrick Swayze did an in-store right after Dirty Dancing. That was huge. I mean, people lined up down the street, and we had, Suicidal Tendencies. The Los Angeles band did it. They drove a flatbed into the back of the parking lot, and and they they were just ripping in the parking lot, and they're so intense. I mean, the cassettes were literally falling off the wall inside the store. So many people all over the place. That was a really cool, in-store appearance. And then I think I mentioned one too, Blind Melon, the original
Yeah.
band with the
Yeah.
Shan did an acoustic in-store in the store, and that was really cool. Really, really cool.
The other thing though about the record store, you'd mentioned these visitors that would come, like Slash from Guns N' Roses, Alice Cooper, Bruce Springsteen, Stevie
Mhm.
Wonder, Billy Idol, Tommy Lee. I mean, something like a Bruce Springsteen walks in,
Right.
like, is there like preparation that goes on? Do they say, "Hey, Rick, we got Bruce Springsteen's coming by. You might want to close the store," or how does that work?
Yeah, the only one there was a little heads up one was Billy Idol. That was the only one that we got the call, and that was, Billy Idol at his peak, and they said, "Can we come in? What's a good time?" We kinda had him come in towards the end of the night, so there wasn't a lot of people in there. But the other guys were just, "Oh, the phone's blowing off in my office. Uh, I think it's Springsteen's in the store." I'm out the door, I'm
Yeah.
out talking to him. So that was really cool.
Huh.
That was just yeah, they would just come in and you wouldn't know, and everybody would just kind of the customers didn't freak out too bad until they kind of really understood. We kind of brought them into the back of the store in the office area for a little while to everybody kind of cool out. Alice Cooper would come in a lot. We used to rent videos, but he would come in with a baseball cap on, and no one would know who it was.
Hmm.
He would just rent videos. He would call me up and say, "Hey, Rick, do you have this, that, video? Can you put it aside for me?" Or he'd call my assistants. Everybody knew who he was. He was probably the one who came in the most. Him and Dwight Yoakam, the famous country guy, and he was really cool too. He was from Ohio, and we used to talk baseball all the time because he would come out with his little Cincinnati Reds hat on. And I was a big Dodger fan, and he would always come back into the back room and talk with everybody and just kind of sit down. And we're doing the shipment back there, and there's Dwight Yoakam just sitting back there, just being a really great guy. He was probably my favorite.
Yeah, I saw him 1985. He opened up for the Violent Femmes at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago.
That's an interesting bill.
Yeah, it was very interesting, Bill. Yeah, yeah, kind of unusual. The other thing I wanted to talk about, listening to your podcast, you had reviewed Bono's book, Surrender, 40 Songs, One Story. And so you were talking about U2 and such, and you'd seen him, I guess, when you're 19 on the Unforgettable Fire tour. I had seen them on that tour. But then when you see them again on the Joshua Tree tour, this was when you'd mentioned that Bob Dylan comes out towards the end of the show. And I thought, or I asked, was this the first time you'd seen Dylan? He said, well, no, I saw him back in 1980. So you want to talk about like you seem like a huge Dylan fan. So that whole experience.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to touch on that U2 stuff too, because that's good stuff. Yeah. The Dylan one. Yeah. Okay. 1980 was the first time I saw Bob, and that was really interesting because that was the born again time for Dylan. So that was his religious time. And, being that young, I think I was 16 or 15 or 16, didn't really catch on it. I had the album. I think I would have known a little bit better. The album's Slow Train Coming, the album's not his super heavy religious, but it was his first one. So I go to the show. I beg one of my friends to go to the show because none of my friends in high school liked Bob. It was just this thing that my stepfather turned me on to. And I just really, something just kind of came over me with Dylan and his lyrics. It just grabbed me. And I just had to see him. He's coming to town. He's playing this small theater, this Bushnell Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. And we go into the show, and he comes out, and he's almost like preaching right before the show starts, and then goes into the first song, and it's from the new album, and he plays the whole show with absolutely no old songs. And my friend was just not happy. He just kept hitting my arm going, come on, man, come on. And they're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of digging it because it's Dylan. I mean, was the first time I was in the same room with him. And as I go through the years, that experience alone, to me, sometimes is worth the price of the ticket. There's something about, where Bob travels all over the world, but this one time, this one night, there he is right there. I'm in the same room with him. It's a powerful thing for me. And it happened when I was 16, that first time, even though he was playing religious stuff, even though he was preaching, even though he played not one old song, I still loved it. And that lit the Dylan fuse right there. Yeah.
Then he unexpectedly, like you mentioned at that U2 concert, plays a couple songs towards the end of in 1987.
Right. LA Sports Arena, I'm pretty sure it was. I was like in the fifth row, and I'll always remember because I saw him before he came out. And I lost it. I could see him. I'm like, there he is. I'm like, Dylan's here tonight. I'm going crazy. And my friends were like, what's the matter? I'm like, it's Bob. I got really excited. I knew he was coming out. And then I think Knocking on Heaven's Door was one song I kind of remember them playing. I think they played a couple, but it was great because Bono was so excited to be with Bob. You could just tell the band just went to a whole other level, and the place just exploded. And then, of course, it was just so great to see him unexpectedly pop out at a U2 show.
That had to be incredible.
It was. I mean, you seeing U2, to me, U2 was a band that reached a place emotionally that very few bands can touch. Something about what they do live every time I've seen them is ability to take themselves and the audience to this other place. When I saw them on that Unforgettable Fire tour, I'll never forget, me and my brother went, and I literally had tears in my eyes towards the end of that concert. It was that powerful. I've never seen that. And I didn't know what to expect. It was so, so powerful. And me and my brother just looked at each other, and we just said, we got to come back tomorrow night. They did 2 nights, and we bought tickets. We came back again because I've never seen a concert like that. All those concerts we saw up to that time were just more rock and roll and party and good time. But U2 just did this thing, and they always did that thing. Every time I saw them, from the Joshua Tree inside, and then I saw Joshua Tree tour at the LA Coliseum outside, 80, 100,000 people. They lit up the torch, and it's just magnificent. There's just so many great memories of those shows. And I saw him at Dodger Stadium, the Zooropa tour, and that was just such a spectacle at Dodger Stadium. And again, it's such a huge venue, but they still could touch people, even though they're doing it to 100,000 versus 15,000 or whatever it was inside.
That concert that I saw, Unforgettable Fire at UIC Pavilion, that's at University of Illinois, Chicago, holds like 10,000 people.
Okay.
I think I had third row center because I was a student there. Man, it was there's a recording of that show on YouTube, and they are on fire. Yeah, it's a great recording. The sound quality is fantastic.
Right.
Anybody out there listening, they should definitely check that out. It,
I'll look for that one.
like you were saying, you can still, even though it's a recording, feel the emotion and the connection to the audience.
Very cool. And that book is really good too. I got to say that Bono book is really good. He writes like a poetry language, a Bono language. It's different. I like that when someone will write more to who they really are versus you can tell some of them's been stepped on. It's been edited a little too heavy. Bono's obviously there were times you could feel it was edited, but his voice really comes out, the poetic nature of him and how important, his philanthropy is. That was one of the things that really surprised me about that book was, wow, that guy has dedicated his whole life early on to helping other people. He's an amazing guy. It's a really cool book. I highly recommend that one.
Yeah, my wife's reading it right now.
You're going to like it for sure if you're a U2 fan.
Yeah, Rick, as far as Bob Dylan goes, though, you had mentioned that you had almost met Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And I thought that's kind of funny because, people have stories where they actually met the person, but I thought yours was kind of special because you almost met Bob Dylan.
Right.
So how did that work out?
Well, Bob's not an easy guy to meet, first of all. I don't know. I've never met anybody who's ever met him, not even come close. And I never really thought of ever really meeting him. But the story goes, my friend brother was working security at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. And he got his backstage passes to the Dylan show. So Dylan's doing 3 nights out there. And we go backstage to meet his brother, just say hi to him. And he's working security. So he's kind of busy. But he's like, come on, I want to tour you around this other section in the back. Because I was back there before, but I never saw like this other side. And I was like, what's on the other side? So he said, oh, come on, I'll take you over there. So he takes us over to this other side. Then he gets a call on a walkie-talkie. Something's going on. Can't remember. So he's got to go. And he's like, I'll see you guys later. Okay. So it's me and my buddy. And we just kind of come down this hallway. And it's kind of a very narrow hallway. Maybe 2 people, the tops, could get in. And we're just chatting, me and my buddy. And I turn down, and coming out the end of the hallway is Bob. And there he is. So I kind of like side glance because my buddy's like here, it's a very small hallway and we're walking towards each other. And I'm kind of side glancing at my buddy, like, are you seeing where he's coming right out? This is the moment. And I didn't like have any speech prepared or anything. I didn't even know what I think I just wanted to just shake his hand and say, hi, Bob. So he's not looking at me. I mean, I've been to a bunch of Dylan concerts front row, and I don't think he's ever looked at me. And I've stared at him for hours at a time, just one glance. But no, he's walking down this skinny hallway, and we're getting closer and closer and closer. And his security guy's behind him, this big guy. We're getting closer. I'm just kind of like getting my hand up. And then this monster of a man comes out this door, like right between us, and just everybody back. He just pushes us back. And me and my friend go into this side room, go into this door, and he goes by. And it's really quiet in this room. And we look over, and Dave Stewart, Annie Lennox, Bono, and The Edge, and sitting there having this like intense conversation. Me and my buddy just go blasting into this room, and everybody just looks up, and we're like, oh, hi. And I turned around and like had like a grape off the grape plate, and just, we didn't know what to say. Or just shell shocked from like being 2 feet away from Bob and thrown into this like private room with, with Bono and The Edge and Annie Lennox. And we just like, see ya. And we walked out. And that was it. That's as close as I've ever come to meeting the one and only Bob Dylan.
That's a crazy story. I mean, yeah, you're going to meet Bob Dylan, and then you get thrown in a room with all these other super famous music.
Yeah, it was so shocking. We couldn't even say anything to you were just so nervous and just so thrown off, I couldn't even speak to them. We just took a grape and just got out of there.
That's fantastic. Doug, did you have anything you wanted to chat about with Rick as far as live music? We're going to talk about his podcast here in a minute.
Rick, I recently listened to your review of Jeff Tweedy's book,
All right.
the one that just came out. I just recently read it. I really enjoyed it. Also, from the perspective of being a musician, I agree with your review. It was a nice review, and it's a great book, and I highly recommend it to anybody. Also, his previous book, which talked about, I think it was writing one song
Yep.
or write one song. I read that one too. Again, that's very inspirational. You don't even have to be a musician to appreciate that book, where he encourages you, even if you don't know anything about music, maybe just pick up a recorder and just start recording something. I was struck by a number of the songs in there are songs that I knew and that I
Right.
liked, and I have my own. As soon as you read this, you all of a sudden all of your own memories come back.
Yeah.
He talked about the weight in there by the band, because my band does that song, Wrought
All
Iron
right.
Soul does that song, and he mentioned in there, and this is something I really connected with, he mentioned how a lot of musicians like to do that song, and I thought, "Yeah, he's got that exactly right," because I've been in a couple of bands, and they've all wanted to do that song.
Right.
So, just reinforcement again that he was right on with his observations, in that book, and it's a great book, and I really liked your review of it.
Oh, thanks, thanks. Yeah, it's a book that I think makes you feel good. I know it made me feel good, and I think you nailed it when it talks about it reminds you about music and how it plays a part in your life and where it plays a part in your life. I thought that was really cool. There were so many really great personal moments there, but not only personal for him, but personal for me too. It made me think about those songs and my songs that have those special places in my life. Yeah, it was really well done. I was surprised by it. At first, 50 songs that he chose that made it a certain place, a certain marker in his life, but to me, it really wasn't about those songs. He really didn't really dive deep into a lot of them. If you remember, there were a couple of them he said, "You're not even gonna be able to find this record. It's so obscure." But it's more about, the feeling and the vibe and where he was or where it took him or how it affected him, that I thought was really cool.
Rick, we could start talking about your podcast now, but I just want to say in general, first of all, I love your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's fantastic. You sound great. The music is cool that you use in it and such. But what I find really great about this, especially the books, because like Doug was saying, I'll mention this in a minute about the Jeff Tweedy book, but I'll get a book, a recommendation, usually off of like Sound Opinions. I don't know if you ever listen to Sound Opinion, Greg Cott, Jim DeRogatis, and they'll have an author on and they're talking about the book. But what I like about how you rate a book, like, is it for the casual fan or is it for someone who's like deep, deep?
Right.
And so when these guys review on their show, they're music critics. So there's nothing that's really going to go over their head or get too deep. And I've bought books and I start reading them. Like I think you'd mentioned in your Geddy Lee episode that
Right.
it's a great book. It's well written and everything, but it gets deep.
Right. Yeah. You gotta be a Rush fan to really, I think, really enjoy that book.
Yeah. So why don't you talk about your podcast and a
Sure.
little bit like your rating system and
Okay. The rating system. Everybody likes the rating system. Podcasts just came up with my passion for music. I think you can pretty much tell. I get very animated and excited when I talk about music, and I've always been that way. It's been that way my whole life. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I started because I read so many rock and roll books and watch so many documentaries. To me, I always equate it like rock and roll to me is a big puzzle. And I've got a lot of the pieces already filled in. I know the Hendrix and I know the Dylan stuff and I know Stevie Ray. I've got all these pieces filled in. But when I read a book, there's always a couple little extra pieces that I get to apply to this puzzle. I'll never finish the puzzle because it's so vast and so deep, which I think is great. I don't want to finish the puzzle, but it gives me a little extra little piece to that puzzle. And that's what I enjoy so much about the books in the documentaries that I just want to share that with whoever's going to listen. And that's where I thought of, okay, well, why don't I do a podcast about it? And I wanted to be the place where people go for recommendations. The review, I think, is important to be honest and tell people what you're going to expect and what I get out of the book. I think my reviews aren't telling you what it is. A lot of reviews just tell you what the book is about. I'm like, well, why do I want to? I don't watch a lot of trailers. I don't like spoilers. I want to experience it myself firsthand. So I'm really not diving into too much of like, it goes to this and this and this. It's just more kind of an overview of kind of my feelings of what kind of the flow of the book. And the rating system is something I wanted to come up with that would kind of give people an understanding of what it means to me and how I would rank it. So I do a 1 through 4, and I set it up with 1 is front row center, and that's an exception to the rules. That's you're one of a kind, really, really special book. I think I've given out maybe 4 or 5 front row centers over the year. A 2 is a floor seat, great book, highly recommended, still really good. 3 is a Loge, and that's okay. It still could be recommended. And 4, you're in the nosebleeds, baby. That one, I'm going to pass on. And I hate giving out the nosebleed. I'm not that kind of like bashing critic guy. And you know what's funny? The Stevie Ray Vaughan documentary, Stevie and Jimmy.
I could feel your pain, Rick, for giving that review. I was like, oh man, this is killing him to say this. I could feel it.
Oh, it hurt. It does, and then everybody has their opinions. And sometimes I talk with authors a little bit or the directors, and you understand they're making their art and they're
Right.
passionate about it. And I'm not here to bash anything, but that one hurt because it didn't work for me. And I had to be honest. I remember talking to my wife about it. I'm like, I don't want to do this one, but I was so pumped because I'm a huge Stevie Ray fan. I was so excited to see it. And I saw it and I was just, wow, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
You
that I appreciated the honesty, but again, I could feel your pain.
Yeah, I'm sure it came through like that one stuff.
One thing, Rick, I just want to get your take on this because a previous guest had said, an interesting way to meet a musician is at a book signing. I thought, oh yeah, he met Greg Allman, in fact,
Very cool.
at a book signing. But Doug had mentioned this Jeff Tweedy book, and it was kind of a seeing them live rock talk studio mashup. He was doing this book tour, and you buy tickets to see him. He was at this little theater called the Athenaeum Center in Chicago. It holds 863 people. And so you go there, you get a book, it's signed. You don't get to meet Jeff, but then he was on stage with Peter Sagal. Wait, don't tell me. And he was interviewing him for like 45 minutes. And he played like a handful of songs from these requests they had taken from the audience previously. You could write in a request, but do you ever go to anything like that, Rick?
I would love to. And I think it's kind of becoming a thing because Bono did it for his book. He did like a little book tour concert, kind of like Springsteen on Broadway thing. And Geddy Lee just did a tour for his book tour where he would come out, be interviewed, have special guests, play a couple songs. So it's kind of becoming a cool little thing. And maybe a different way for them to connect with their audience and get out there on like a little mini book tour. I haven't seen one live, but I'm up for it. Yeah.
Yeah, Bono, when he was at the Chicago Theater, and I was trying to get tickets. I mean, I was on Ticketmaster's app, like everybody else. Those tickets were going like $300-400. Anywhere close was like $1,500. This is the morning, and I'm talking about the morning they're going on sale, not like secondary market. I'm like, wait a second, am I seeing you too, or is Bono talking about a book here? It was kind of crazy, and of course, it sold out in like a half hour or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of becoming a thing.
I wish they recorded that Bono one. I wish they record all of them. I think that would be really cool documentary to put out from that show. Cause that Springsteen to Broadway one that thing is so powerful. I cried multiple times during that one, and that thing was intense. Have you seen that? The Springsteen Broadway?
No, I have not.
Yeah, great documentary. I'm sure probably chase it down somewhere. But yeah, the Springsteen, when he was doing his tour, his Broadway shows where he'd come out and just tell stories about his life and his songs. And wow, of course, Bruce
Mm.
always brings it
My wife would love that. That sounds interesting.
real good.
I didn't know what else you wanted to maybe talk about your podcast or maybe what you had coming up.
Sure. Or I can give you the best of 2023s if you'd like.
Right. Yes.
You mentioned that because I'll always have to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. We were going to talk about that. So, yeah, go ahead and let it rip.
Okay, so I did a year-end show at the end of the year where I did my awards, my Rock Talk Studio Awards, and I did a couple different categories for books. I was the best book about a band, and that went to Brothers and Sisters, the Allman Brothers book. Best book about a musician in a band, and that was another Allman Brothers book, which that was a sneaky little book. This guy, Bob Beatty, is a great historian, writer, and he wrote a really cool book about Duane Allman and the journey to Fillmore East. So it's just this little snapshot of the band up until Fillmore East. And really, really well done. I really like that a lot. And then there was the book I learned the most from called Secret Stars, 10 Underground Rock Stars. And then the book of the year to me was the Warren Zanes book that he wrote about Springsteen, Nebraska album called Deliver Me from Nowhere, the making of Springsteen's Nebraska. Fascinating story. I just cannot believe that story's never been told like that because there's so much drama in that story. There's so much going on around that record. And to think that Bruce made that record right after he's on this huge peak of Born in the USA, Darkness, The River. And the record label's like, okay, here comes the moonshot, right? We know this next one's going to be this monster. And he just goes and rents a room in New Jersey by himself, sets up a little recording system in a bedroom right next to his bed and just starts playing songs. And he recorded that on a cassette. It's one of the really cool parts of the book. He recorded it on a cassette and he just had this cassette that he had in his pocket in his shirt. And he said he would take this cassette out and there would be lint on that cassette. And he gave that to his manager, I think it's Landau. And he said, this is what I've been working on. And it just blew him away. And little Steven too was a big part of that. He turned Steven Van Zandt onto it and he just like, whoa, wow, what is this? This is incredible. And I just love the story about him taking it to the record label and saying, I want to do this. Because he had 3 or 4 songs into Born in the USA. So that they kind of knew what was coming. Like I said, they were ready for what was coming. He talked him into putting out that Nebraska album, and that book is so well written, and there's so many spinning plates. There's so much going on. Like I said, trying to get that recording off that cassette to be able to produce a record that could be released was a huge story. It was a huge part of that story. Trying to find someone to master it and to mix it and to get it into production to even be able to release it. And then Bruce personally during that time was going through a nervous breakdown, really. He was really struggling with mental health issues. And he talks about, kind of having a breakdown on a road trip that he took during that time and how those songs were wrapped around that. It's a great book. Deliver Me from Nowhere by Warren Zanes. He wrote the Tom Petty book too, the book about Tom Petty, which is really well written, very in depth. Great book. That was my favorite book of the year.
Yeah. I thought that was neat how how you selected them and such. And again, I just think it's super helpful and useful. Anybody who likes to read books to, you do your preview. And are there any books out there like, older books that you might recommend?
I read a ton of books. I mean, older, like not from last year that's not on the show. Like
Exactly. Like some classic, like these 3 books.
So I got to say the Dylan book Chronicles is a great, great book written in Bob language. It's Bob talking, spinning his yarns. He takes liberty in a lot of situations. So I wouldn't say it's super factual, but it's so well written and so cool. I'll always recommend Bob Dylan's Chronicles. Robbie Robertson's memoir to me, Testimony, that came out years ago. That is a great, great book. Really, really well written. Again, I think it talked about, artists that get kind of stepped on by editors and really you don't get that feel of like this their voice coming through and their heart coming through, and they're really talking about their life, really giving you the truth. But that book has a lot of truth in it. And he's a very interesting story too, the Robbie Robertson testimony book. I love the Patti Smith books. I read a lot of Patti Smith books. Just Kids, fantastic, fantastic book. She's a beautiful writer, a beautiful soul. I love Patti Smith. That's three just off the top of my head. I have to look at my bookcase. It's around the corner, but I'm always reading like three or four. Now that I'm doing the podcast, I read probably like two or three at a time because I like to stay ahead and be able to do the shows. But then I'll watch the documentaries too, which is a little easier because it doesn't take as much time, but it's kind of a quicker snapshot of something that makes me kind of step my game up. Like, okay, I've got an hour and 30 minutes and I've got to absorb it and then review it, which sometimes I get tripped up on. I try to absorb it first and then watch it again and do more of like, pick out, okay, what is here for someone who might not know who, let's say the immediate family is. That's my next show about the session band that's in LA that was on so many records throughout the 70s and 80s. If you don't know anything about them, how do I get my audience to understand what it's about and give them an opportunity to see if it's for them or for not? Because like I said, that's what my show to me really is a show that recommends rock and roll books and documentaries. So you just can go to that one place first, trying to Google, top books or whatever. So it's kind of a one-stop shop place where I try to do what I call a spotlight title. So one title a month where I give the mass review, but then I do the previews. And I lately have been doing kind of more of like book buzz and documentary news because there's so much cool stuff coming out. I mean, Alex Van Halen just announced he's written his memoir. It's coming out in October. That's huge. It's huge news for me in the book world. And I want to make sure that I pass that along to people. And I get, I'm getting stuff sent to me now so I can kind of get a little ahead. I know what's coming out and I like to share that. And I get excited about it, as you could probably see.
Speaking of documentaries, and it's technically not a documentary, but Daisy and the Six. Did you see that?
I haven't seen that.
It's dramatic. I mean, they have actors in
Right.
it and everything. It's supposed to be loosely based maybe on like Fleetwood Mac or something like that, maybe with a little Janis Joplin thrown in. I highly recommend that you watch that. I think it's 6 episodes, 8 episodes, something like that. And it kind of tracks this band and all the, of course, behind the scenes soap opera stuff that goes on. But I thought it was really excellent. It was really well done. I recommend that. I don't know if you only do strictly documentaries or if you would do a dramatic thing like that.
Sure, I think so.
I think it would be a great one for you to review in your podcast.
I thought what was cool with that series is towards the end, they're at the pinnacle of their career, everything's unraveling, typical rock and roll. They're playing Soldier Field in Chicago. It's their last show. The old Soldier Field from the inside, as if you were at a concert. And I've been to several concerts at Soldier Field, the old one before they made the spaceship, stadium thing. And I thought that was kind of cool. Like, wow, how did they do that? The crowd's there, the Coliseum, is there.
Very cool. All right, I got to check it out. I'll do it. I'll definitely check out that because I know I knew of it and I just never got around to it. And I love Fleetwood Mac. I'm a big Fleetwood Mac fan. Seen him a bunch of times. Actually got a chance to see Lindsey Buckingham in a 400 seat venue here in San Diego called the Belly Up. And me and my wife were maybe a couple feet away from him. He did a solo show maybe about 6 or 7 years ago here. And wow, just be that close to him, watching him play that, that little guitar that he has and that finger picking technique he does.
He's a very underrated guitar player. A lot of people don't realize how really good he is.
It's so true. So true. Very unique style and very, very different. To be that close to see it was great. Yeah, but that's a good one. Well, I've got to mention my favorite rock and roll documentary because I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I want to send this one out to you and your listeners too. It's a great documentary that I was just I didn't see it coming. I didn't think this was going to be my favorite one of the year, but the Little Richard documentary, I Am Everything, is a tremendous documentary, really, really well done and really kind of shines a light on this guy who I knew who he was and I knew his importance, but this showed me a different side of who he was and how torn he was between sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, those three things, he went back and forth through those three things throughout his whole life. But when he hit that rock and roll, man, no
Yeah.
one was touching him. He was doing something. I always say if Little Richard came on the scene today, he would be huge. He'd be huge. Could you imagine Little Richard just came out next week and, put out a record? That guy was some of that footage of what he was just tearing it up. I mean, burning the place down. And I don't know if I think it was said in the documentary, but everybody who came after him was a piece of him. James Brown, Prince, Jagger, Tina Turner, they were all Little Richard. That he was the bedrock. And that documentary really kind of said, okay, pay attention. Don't miss who this guy was. And he deserves so much credit as the founder of rock and roll.
Yeah, I did see that, Rick, on an airplane, actually.
Oh, really?
And coming back from a Harry Styles concert in Portugal,
Wow. Wow. Okay.
which you just mentioned, like towards the end, they do this montage of all the people he's influenced. And one of the very last ones was actually Harry Styles. So yeah, it's an incredible, I agree, a documentary. And I had no idea before seeing that all of the people he influenced. He's like the original.
The original. Yeah, definitely. And he was such a character. I mean, it's such a personality, such a unique guy. And just for who he was at that time too, and how he overcame all that was going on during that time it's a powerful story. Really, really well done documentary.
We're kind of getting towards the end of our time, Rick.
All right.
Is there anything you want to talk about further with the podcast, or plug your podcast you're on? Are you on most of the platform?
Yep, all the directories I'm on. You can find me wherever you find your podcast. And it's really, again, just a show that recommends rock and roll books, documentaries, and movies, where I just kind of stop place for you to come once a month to learn about what's new, what's out there. And so you don't have to go searching around. I'll give you the straight truth about the rock and roll books that are out there. It's a great community. The people that love the rock and roll books and documentaries, I really enjoy. That's why I'm on social so much. I really enjoy talking to people about it because you get recommendations, you see different sides of things, and you get to talk rock and roll, which that's what I'm all about. So thank you guys for having me on and asking me to come on and talk about not only my concert experience, but my just enthusiasm for music and the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
That's a wrap for our show. I want to thank today's guests for sharing their concert stories with us. Make sure to check out our show notes at seeingthemlive.com for links to websites, photos, and other artifacts mentioned in the show. I also want to thank my producer, Doug Florzak. The theme music for the show was composed by Doug and is featured on his album, Flagstone. If you have a concert story you'd like to share on our podcast, please visit our website and click on Become a Guest in the main menu. Then fill out the form and click the Submit button. If you seem like a good fit for the show, we'll contact you via email. I guess it's time to head for the exits. We'll see you next time on Seeing Them Live.